Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to see you. My name is Grolta Bayamok, and I'm a youth climate activist from Mongolia. As adaptation is deeply personal and important to me as a climate activist in Mongolia, which needs to adapt to climate change as soon as possible, I am pleased to lead this icebreaker session for today. If you have your phones, please direct your camera to this QR code and join us at menti.com. You can also go to the website and enter the code. We will go through a series of questions. Oh, sorry. Could you please? Thank you. If you have any issues joining this Menti, please let me know. Have you joined? Okay. Okay, let's go. First of all, which region do you represent? Looking at this map, you can pin your area in the globus. Let's see who is who from here. We have Americas, we also have Africa, Asia, Europe. Oh, we have numbers, okay. Okay, now we can see we have quite diverse group here from all over the world. We have colleagues joining from Europe, Asia, different parts of Asia, Africa, Americas. Okay, now we can see that we are all over the world. And now, to start the dialogue of strengthening the collaboration between ministries in implementing national adaptation plans, we have to know who is who among the stakeholders. There are Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance, different ministries and government agencies, civil society, international organizations, youth, and if you have any other group that you belong to, you can also write using the small chat icon on the right bottom. Okay, I really love to see it. There are lots of youth members, lots of other ministries, government agencies. We also have the targeted ministries, Ministries of Environment and Finance, and we also have civil society for now. We also have lots of international organizations. Okay, this looks really great. And to bring the perspectives of youth into implementation of national adaptation plans is also really important. So please take a note from our youth members throughout the series. And now let's answer at which stage is your country in advancing in the implementation of national adaptation plans? Are you developing a plan or are you implementing one? Or if you have any other stages relevant to you, then you can also write it as a chat. Okay, we have most of them, most of you developing national adaptation plan. Supporting an app, yes, that's a good, great answer, thank you. Most of us are developing an app. Okay, this kind of exercise is to just put you in the right mood, right mindset before we start to really start the dialogue of strengthening the collaborations between ministries. Okay, are you engaging youth in the NAP process? This is the question. This is the biggest question. If you're a youth member yourself, are you also engaging in the NAP process? You can also skip some of the metrics here, but if you find anything relevant, please do click the agree button. Okay, now we can see that I'm not in the position to engage youth, but I see youth involved in the NAP process, NAP implementation process specifically, but supporting and planning development is also good too. Okay, now we can see that we have different answers. We're not quite going to the agree side, as you can see, which means that we need to be involving, engaging youth in the National Adaptation Plans process a little more. I hope you would agree. And currently, our biggest answer is that I'm not youth, and I'm engaging youth in the NAP process. And we also have I am youth and I am engaged in the NAP process, which is a great answer to see. And now let's move to the next one. Okay, this is the futures triangle that I'm trying to use to present you the next question. This was published in the 6 Pillars, Futures Thinking for Transforming Studies, which was published in 2008. And to project plausible future, we have to think of three corners of this triangle: weight of the history, push of the present, and pull of the future. I would like you to keep that in mind when you answer the next question. What is your vision for the plausible future? And you can submit 3 words or 3 phrases describing this. Ideally, I would like you to think about the past, the weight of history, and the pull of the future, and the push of the present. In the context of strengthening the collaborations between ministries, of course, in the context of implementing national adaptation plans, of course. Curbed, yes, I love that. You can see that here the keyword is plausible, which means that it can be achieved. It's reasonable, and our present is already going there. So I encourage you to share your thoughts. Of course, this question requires more time, much more time, but we can go there. If anybody has answers ready, you can also just raise your hands and tell to the group of people around you. Can be approach, okay. And we currently have 2 responses, but we had lots more responses in the previous question. So, okay, we have 7 responses. Oh, okay, economy is better, adaptation is a priority, coherent approaches, livelihood not impacted, adaptive and resilient. Okay, so I would like you to remember these responses, remember your own thought, remember your own vision when going through the rest of this session. And thank you so much. This was the overall icebreaker, and I hope that it sets you in the right mood. And I would like to transfer the mic to the next presenter. Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Good morning, everyone, and a great thanks to our moderator to have that, I think, question about the stakeholders right at the beginning, because this event, I think, is very important for trying to strengthen the dialogues between different stakeholders, especially the ministries of environment, sector ministries, finance, but also, of course, all the other actors that are very, very critical to strengthening the collaboration between ministries of finance and ministries of environment. I just want to also say, just very, very happy to be here with the UN Environment Program, the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, and very happy to be really part of this collaboration and to have all of you here. It's quite early and very, very busy COP that is going on. I just want to say a little bit about the National Adaptation Plans and how it's relevant to this topic. There's a lot of discussion at the COP, but I think just to remind ourselves of some of the framing context, which often many environment ministries are aware of, but there are also many, many other actors who may be less aware of them. So please bear with me. The National Adaptation Plan decision is now over 10 years old, but the main objectives are really to identify medium to long-term adaptation needs and to mainstream them into planning and budgeting, and with the objective of reducing vulnerability of communities and countries across the world. And it is an iterative process, which means that it's a learning process, and as countries are learning, they're also adapting their plans. It's not just adaptation at the local level, it's a national adaptation process itself is evolving. And where are we now? It's been a very slow going. It's almost 10 years since this discussion began. It's gone through some ups and downs, but there has been an uptake in the last 2-3 years, which we're very glad to see. We know that around 60 developing countries as of yesterday have submitted national adaptation plans to the UNFCCC, and many more have actually are in the process and may not have submitted these. But there are over 100 countries that are working on this. And of that, there are sectoral adaptation plans. We call them sectoral NAPs in certain sectors, and as you can see, they straddle a wide diversity of sectors: health, agriculture, biodiversity, ecosystems, cities, coastal areas. And also, the adaptation planning is a global process. Many developed countries have done their NAPs, and there are also examples in the list of NAP submissions. I think the last one was by Canada, and it's a very, very well elaborated adaptation plan. And I think with our partners, with UNEP, with UNDP, there are also other UN agencies are not in the room. There's been a very concerted support to adaptation planning across the world over the last 6 to 7 years, and you can see that it's across all the regions that there is an adaptation planning process being supported by our agencies. And while the NAPs decision is more than 10 years old, the NDCs are obviously sort of the key political instrument for the Paris Agreement. And adaptation planning is in both. And I think we all now know the nature of the NDCs. But I think the important point here is that in the last round, the majority of countries have included adaptation commitments in their nationally determined contributions. And as we go to the NDC 3.0, it's highly likely that this number will go up, because adaptation is seen really as being, it's by putting it in the NDC, there is a very strong political priority that is being put on adaptation, including some of the key areas. And I think that there are also a lot of coalition members that are actively involved in the NDC process. But of course, it's an instrument for mitigation, adaptation. In some cases, it's looking at co-benefits as well. Adaptation, NAPs are purely on adaptation and are supposed to be more implementation oriented. They have an action plan, and there are different time horizons. They are seen to be a medium to long-term instrument. Some of them are 5 years or 10 years. And there is also an urgency that is being placed in the GST and GGA to submit these NAPs by 2025. I mean, and this is, well, we are already coming close to that point, and that's a pretty steep hill to climb, but it's clearly a major priority. And the NAPs are mainly led by Ministries of Environment. There has been limited engagement with Ministries of Finance. That is why this coalition discussions, the discussions with the webinars, dialogues are really triggering a lot more exchange between the sector ministries, environment ministries, and finance ministries, because there is a big discussion that the NAPs are not implementable or they're not investable. And so there has to be much more discussion with finance ministries and finance actors around this topic. And I think this is sort of the main focus for countries that are working on these now, is really how to make them investable. I think that the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report has been really providing some of the very critical numbers and pointing to some of those shortfalls in finance, and that nations must dramatically step up adaptation. This is a very key topic at this COP, and let's see how it goes. But I think we do, I think we have a very clear idea of the shortfalls and the numbers. And what the latest report is pointing to is that public adaptation finance flows are rising, but there is still a huge gap between what is needed. There's acceleration of planning and implementation efforts, but again, they're not fast enough. More support and more ambition is required. And the area of work that really needs a lot more action is the enabling factors, the financial instruments from public and private actors. And just a reminder, what are those pieces in the NAP that support this entire process? I'm not going to go into all the examples, but countries are doing a lot of very foundational work to actually help the whole catalyzing and mobilizing adaptation finance process. So risk screening and climate cost benefit analysis is being done by many countries. We have an example of Tonga there. Risk assessments at different scales are extremely important, because often that's also the information private sector is asking for. Is there a risk assessment? Can we quantify the risks, etc.? There are also lots of countries. We have the example of Azerbaijan there that has been doing vulnerability assessments of many, many rayons. These are just a few examples, but there's a lot happening at the country level. Indonesia is doing climate budget tagging, review of adaptation allocations. Several countries are working on green taxonomies, which include adaptation. Monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems are being established as part of NAP. And in many cases, they are tracking adaptation activities, also expenditure, and also effectiveness. In some cases, we have an example of Bosnia, where municipalities are developing local adaptation finance strategies. And this is all under the umbrella of the National Adaptation Plans. So it's not just about submitting a plan centrally. It's actually all these activities that are taking place in these processes which really are enhancing the evidence base and the metrics that are needed to mobilize more finance. So why is climate adaptation important for finance ministries? Economic resilience and fiscal stability, that's what ministries of finance are really concerned with, that reducing climate-related fiscal risks, preserving stability, mobilizing finance for adaptation, enhancing international and domestic sources of finance to boost resilience. There is this triple dividend that is being discussed to avoid future costs and losses, stimulate economic activity, social and environmental co-benefits. We have global numbers for every dollar invested. I don't know the exact numbers, but we know that there are, for so and so many dollars in early warning system, this is a benefit. These numbers have been computed globally, but there are not enough of those numbers at the country level. If you invest in X, this is the triple dividend that will happen, because that is also kind of convincing for investors. And it's not the job of the finance ministries alone, but this kind of information can be helpful for countries. And this policy coordination is extremely important. And so far, the adaptation plans were really environment driven. And without having ministries of finance right from the beginning involved in this discussion, there isn't going to be a policy coherence or coordination. So they're not actors that have to come in later. They must be part of the process. So that's some of the sort of points we put for framing. And I'm ending with the quote of the Secretary General, which is really about this investability of the plans, and that there are plans, but they need to be made more investable. And there should be more collaboration between governments, funders, development partners. And again, this very ambitious, but important target for by 2025 to have adaptation investment plans. We are far from that number at the moment, but that is that's the ambition that the the Secretary General, but also in the UAE framework that's being set. So I think with that, I'm going to stop and move on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for really this framing presentation. And now I would like to ask Sam to join me also on the panel, please. My name is Mireille Atala. I head the Adaptation and Resilience branch in UNEP's Climate Change Division. And really, it's our great pleasure to be co-hosting this with UNDP and with the coalition. Maybe we go closer to Adriana then. It's really my great pleasure to be here on this panel together with Adriana Bonilla, who is the Director of Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment of Costa Rica, and Samu Gume, who's Assistant Commissioner, Macroeconomic Policy Department at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development of Uganda. Really, the purpose of this panel, by bringing these two ministries together on the panel, is to see what are the opportunities and feasibility, actually, of going in the direction of some of the gaps in the National Adaptation Planning process that Rohini has so eloquently brought to the fore. Thinking from a macroeconomic perspective, what are the implications of what do you need from the Ministry of Environment in order to make sure that your macroeconomic parameters and planning are actually integrating climate change impacts? And then from the Ministry of Environment, what is it that you need from the Ministry of Finance in order to make sure that the economic and financial assessments of NAPs are robust, that they're investable, but also that domestic finance is associated with that. So I will not do much more in terms of framing of this, and I will go straight to our panelists. And Adriana, I would first like to start by asking you if you could give us an example of past collaboration with the Ministry of Finance in Costa Rica on NAP implementation.
Thank you. My apologies because I sat here from the very beginning because I'm moving slowly these days. First of all, thank you for inviting us to share our thoughts, experiences, and lessons learned about this. What we could mention, especially, is the functional budget classifier for adaptation, climate change, and risk management, which is currently, for the first year, under implementation in our country. This is very important because we've been assigning, allocating resources for different commitments and responsibilities in different sectors. But in the past, until now, we couldn't tell how much money we've been spending or allocating to attend adaptation, as we refer to it. Even more, you could be in developing a lot of actions important for our population and our sectors, but there was impossible to tell how much were you allocating or you have been allocating. And we decided to work over it from this joint perspective among between adaptation and risk management, because not only from the conceptual approach, but also from the public management, or in Spanish, gestión pública, we've been working very closely with the National Authority for Risk Management. They have this monitoring system which is supporting us, helping us to address the actions different institutions and local governments are developing or implementing under the adaptation to climate change approach. So also for this classifier, this functional classifier, it was designed under the program Plan A, which is also the one who supported us to develop the NAP, our NAP 2002 to 2006. It was one of the actions we propose and we have achieved, which is working with the Finance Ministry to develop this functional classifier. So now, for the next year, we will be able to tell how much we are allocating for adaptation and risk management. And also, this has a complementary goal achieved, which is the national financing strategy for risk management, within which the climate risk is highlighted and is very important to address adaptation through climate risk issues. So these are two very, very important key instruments we have now with the Ministry of Finance to address climate change adaptation from a strategic, medium and long-term perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. This is, I think, some interesting thoughts, food for thought also, and approaches for other countries. And now turning to you, Sam, Uganda is currently chairing the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action and has been a very, very active member of that. So, but from a domestic level, I know that Uganda is one of the few countries that has embedded a climate finance unit in its Ministry of Environment, its Ministry of Finance, sorry. And so from your perspective, what do you think is your role in the NAP formulation and implementation, and how can you support the Ministries of Environment in that sense?
Thank you so much for the wonderful question, very wide. But first of all, it's a pleasure really to be here, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this topic, financing and adaptation. Adaptation is at the heart of our economy and survival in Uganda, because we are vulnerable to climate shocks, number one, and the shocks are evident, both on the society but also on the economy. I'll talk about that a little later, but first you said we're taking over the co-chairship of the Coalition of Finance Ministers on Climate Action. This is a coalition of 93 countries who came together to make sure that Ministers of Finance get more involved in climate action, adaptation and mitigation. Because we realized that It's important. This question is no longer an environmental question, it's a developmental economic question because it's impacted. So, and in there, that's why I come here. And as co-chairs, we shall make sure we do knowledge exchange and you know, products, especially on adaptation and financing. So that's a critical area. But I'll go back to the question as Ugandan. Yes, we do have a climate finance unit, and we are leveraging on that to get adaptation financing and mitigation finance. But I want to go back to the NAPS and the planning framework, because as Minister of Finance, we're in charge of the planning framework, we're in charge of annual budgets. And there was a resolution, a realization before that the NAPS, especially the NDCs and other action plans targeting adaptation, were not very well aligned to our national development plans and annual budgets. And therefore, they couldn't be implemented. And that's what brings us in strongly to make sure that we are there and we are at the forefront of working closely with the line ministry of ensuring that these documents are aligned and speaking to each other. That what we're proposing in the NAPS, what we're proposing in NDCs is consistent with our macroeconomic objectives and development agendas, is consistent with our ability to raise money domestically and also globally. You know, for example, our NDC here, the NAPS also are coming up with, we want 28 billion USDs. We don't have it. We don't have it as a country at the moment. And then you can't, you say we're going to fund 80%, 20%, and we expect 80% to come from somewhere. We are not sure. This is unrealistic. And we're saying, you know, let's sit down, Minister of Finance, we can guide the technical, we can guide ourselves and be able to raise this. So what have we done to come to that? There are institutional frameworks. Number one, we have a tripartite agreement between ourselves, Minister of Finance, and the National Planning Authority and Minister of Water and Environment to make sure that we do this, we align the planning documents properly. It's been there, it didn't work well. No, it's yeah, kind of, we've had this for around 5 years, but you know, you can have a steering committee. Yes, it is there. Ministers sitting together and saying, but Minister of Water and Environment, you know these things that you can do better. So how do we operationalize that? You must have a functional technical working group that has all these different departments, right from the technical wing, Minister of Water, very key, because they're technical people, but have Minister of Finance, have National Statistical Offices, and have National Planning Authority working together at technical level to be informed. Once we got that into place, we started seeing things moving a little bit our way. And we had all different development partners helping us. We came up with a system which has disaster risk assessment. You look at the risks that come up, that we're supposed to adapt to. Then have the economic models, macroeconomic models to look at the impact and be able to understand it and be able to tell economists and funders that this is the impact on the economy and the society, and then move to budget tagging to ensure that there's financial flows. And the climate finance unit now comes in handy to see that this is working. We've seen a little bit progress in that. It's not an easy way. We want it to happen more. Because I usually tell people, look here, if you analyze our budget as a country in Uganda, we invest in roads, we invest in infrastructure, we invest in human capacity development, we invest in agriculture, we invest in social services, tourism particularly. So what is not adaptation here? I ask myself. It's a little bit of tweaking what we're doing, having the adaptation plans being reflected in our national development plan and budgets. And this is not easy, but it's something we are trying, because we, as finance ministries, as economists, we are looking at supporting growth, supporting employment, and being able to do it in a short time. But it's a long-term strategy. And that is where ministries of finance should come in and work closely with my. Oh, I thought you had switched me off because I talked a lot. But we need to work closely with line ministries. The only challenge, and this is probably, I'm talking to people who are from line ministries here, line ministries should also accept it, that ministries of finance come and join us. It is a complementary action. And I hope my colleague here will be able to accept it. It's been a little not easy, but we have to understand what we're doing. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Actually, you touched on a very, very important point, I think, which is this issue of mandate competition and sometimes, friction among ministries and within government structures. So actually, that's a very good segue for my next question to both of you, is what do you see the opportunities for working jointly or closely between ministries of environment and finance?
Well, in our case, the public policy instruments in climate change, whether it could be the NDC, the NAP, or the long-term strategy, which is our plan for decarbonization, decarbonizing the economy. None of them was designed considering the methodology required by the National Planning Authority for the National Development Plan. So this is very interesting because we think climate change, we think environment, and it's this bias that when you are inside of the issue, you see everything like this tunnel, with this tunnel vision, and you expect the others to think and prioritize and conceptualize as you do, right? So we develop all these useful, relevant, even beautifully presented instruments in documents, but they are not documents. They are supposed to be public policy tools or instruments for you to achieve something. And you do not achieve that just by yourself. In our case, as Ministry of Environment and Energy in Costa Rica, we have both in one, because this Sustainable Development Energy design. But the problem is that you cannot expect the Ministry of Finance, in this case, to just accept what you are saying if you do not approach offering a space to understand each other and to promote this common understanding regarding how they need to work in order to help you to have, in this case, resources from this public planning perspective. They have this mandate, we have our mandate, but in the middle there is the National Ministry of Planning, right? And the National Ministry of Planning is the head of this national planning, the National Plan for Development. So finance would say, your actions, your plans are not in the National Development Plan. So these institutions are requesting funds to do this and this and this. This could be very important. But those actions are not in the National Development Plan. How can I justify, as Ministry of Finance, to provide the funds if the National Development Plan is a law? Yes. So the thing is that for the first time, we are taking into consideration the methodology required by the National Planning Ministry to accept our actions in the public policy instruments for climate change, according to the methodology they use, the indicators, in the kind of indicators they use, so they could include these actions and accept these actions, and the institutions could come and say, Ministry of Finance, would you give me money to do this in climate change? It sounds like obvious, but it has not been. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Adriana. Sam, your ministry is actually finance, economic development, and planning. So the structures at national level may change, right? Because you have a Ministry of Planning that's separate from finance and 3 different entities, whereas here it's coalesced. In a minute, please, Sam, because we need to close at 11, and Diego will be closing the session. What's your thoughts in terms, are you optimistic in terms of that collaboration between the ministries?
Yes, I am. That's, if you stop me here, yes, I am. But there's a lot of work to be done. Right. One, to convince ourselves in the technical ministry, but again, there's capacity gap in the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance people don't understand this. We have to make sure they understand. But I'm very optimistic this will happen, and once we get this collaboration, we shall have the flows of money towards adaptation. And I usually tell people, like I said, it's not only the global financing we're looking at, the domestic financing. How are we using our money that we are realizing? Can we put it in adaptation? I thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Sam. Thank you very much, Adriana. We can all stay here while I invite Diego Mesapuyo, who is Deputy Head of Climate Policy Division at the IMF, on behalf of the coalition, to close this session. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think this is an extremely important event. And you know, one of my main messages is that collaboration is a shared responsibility, and I'm very happy to hear the experiences from Costa Rica and from Uganda, from Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Finance, because we need to ensure that there's much more collaboration going forward. As a background, so I'm here on behalf of the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, which has been working very hard for the last 5 years. As Sam said, as incoming co-chairs, more than 90 countries are members now. And the coalition has 6 guiding principles, which we call the Helsinki Principles. And at least 3 of them are directly related to collaboration between ministries. So we have, you know, aligning policies with the Paris Agreement goals is our Helsinki Principle number 1. We also have mainstreaming climate policies in the Ministry of Finance, which is Helsinki Principle number 4. And we also have share experiences and expertise. This is within countries and across countries, which is exactly what we're doing here. So this is exactly one of the actions that we encourage our members to do. So I'm very, very happy to see this, and I'm just coming from another event in which we're looking at macroeconomic modeling tools for Ministry of Finance. And I think one of the main issues, it was explained by Mrs. Bonilla from Costa Rica, you know, when the Ministry of Finance, of Environment, is in charge of developing these National Adaptation Plans, there's significant public resources that are needed. And if you don't have the collaboration between the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Finance, then it's not possible to fund the National Adaptation Plans. So your example about not including some of this in your development national plan, I think is key. But hopefully, as we move forward and as Ministry of Finance continue to mainstream climate policies for them, it would be much, you know, it would be much better to go forward. So I'll close my statement with saying again that collaboration is a shared responsibility. We're very happy to see this type of event. And I'll just close by saying that, you know, it's not only with Ministries of Environment, but we need to do this with other line ministers as well. I was Minister of Energy and Mines in Colombia before coming to this role in the IMF, and we also had similar issues when we're dealing with energy policy, which is at the core of mitigation. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very, very much. We have a few minutes, and I see that there's an intervention from the floor. There.
Can I just speak from here? Is that okay? Hello, everyone. My name is Anjali Vishwamohanan. I'm Director of Policy with the Asia Investor Group on Climate Change. So we work with private investors who we've been working with several years right now to sort of help them understand that climate risk is a financial risk. So we work with over 70 institutional investors that manage over 29 trillion USD in assets. So we've been largely engaging on the mitigation issue for several years, but then as the awareness of climate risk being a financial risk has increased, there is an increased interest from the private finance side to really understand how risks are being managed by countries. But then because we operate in Asia, in Asian markets that are already exposed to climate risk, we really need to start thinking about how private finance can support these countries in putting out adaptation projects. So we've been looking at adaptation plans from these two lenses, and we've been trying to engage with governments in Asia to see how plans are being developed. Is it being developed in a way that finance can come in and support these plans? And what we've tried to do through engagement is to really understand what's happening on adaptation plans, because for finance, it's a bit hard to really see how plans can translate into projects and how finance can really come in to support that. So just before COP this year, we did an assessment of adaptation plans across 9 Asian markets, including Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia, really highlighting the factors that are important for finance to see adaptation plans engaging. And one of the top sort of requirements in that agenda is to really have the Ministry of Finance involved in the adaptation planning so that the language that's being used is more accessible to the finance sector. I'm happy to sort of share the link to this assessment that we've done, which really looks at whether there is an integrated national view of adaptation risks and responses in countries. And what we're seeing across Asian markets is that there is this level of understanding. But what is really missing is that the private finance institutions are really missing from these dialogues on how to actually start getting finance from private sectors into these projects. We're seeing a lot of understanding of where there is adaptation risk, but in terms of project conceptualization and really engaging with the private sector to understand the types of finance that could help support these projects and how that can be done is really missing. And we're keen to work with governments, with both the Ministries of Environment and the Ministries of Finance in identifying these solutions so that the private finance gap for adaptation can be unlocked. And I would just like to say from the private finance sector that there is a huge interest in doing that. It is just really about including the private finance as well in this coordination that will happen between the Environment Ministry and the Finance Ministry so you can work on these problems together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I please ask you to... Yes, thank you. If there's any other intervention from the floor, we have until 11:15.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dr. Nermeen Abulata. I'm Senior Advisor to the Minister of Industry and Transport in Egypt. Very informative session, but actually I have another line question to the Ministers of Finance and Environment, the IMF and the GCBC. With respect to the new global laws, the CBAM, for instance, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that needs very close collaboration between the Ministries of Environment and Finance. In your countries, are you doing any measures for facing such mechanism, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism? Carbon credit versus carbon tax, they are not mutually exclusive, of course, but the question here, if we have carbon tax in one country, is it recognizable in other countries? And of course that we would need the IMF to overarch that. But this is very important for economic development and exportation and intertrade.
Thank you very much for this question. For those who don't know, CBAM is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism that the European Union has put in place. We'll take one more intervention from the floor, and then I'll give you the time for response.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for my English. I'm from Mozambique, Minister of Economy and Finance. I work in the direction of planning and budgeting. So when I was hearing about the way how other countries, not only in this room, have been working in these adaptations, and now I heard about the necessity of all the ministers who work together, because when we are talking about climate change, is not responsibility of one minister. All of us, we have these responsibilities. But my sadness is about the way how we use these funds. Because it's not only about to collect the funds, even if it's small. If we use it in a proper way, we can see some results. So I want to express my gratitude for UNDP that have been working in Mozambique through this program local. But my deepest question is, how does we can make our society the proper stakeholders? Because we are always working from the top to the ground. But how does we can empowering those people? Because in Mozambique, we don't have this public project that builds houses for the population. It's the single person who make the arrangements to build a house. And when these disasters come, and we've been having these kind of challenges, everything goes. And they feel really trapped without knowing how they can rebuild that small house in a resilient way. So if anyone have any insight that can give us to take it to Mozambique to see how we can use these small funds that we have in a proper way to locate to the proper stakeholders, to empower them and educate them, I will be really grateful. Thank you.
That's a tough question. Thank you very much. Indeed, I think it was in 2022, Cyclone Freddy was quite devastating on Mozambique. Maybe I will start with you, Diego, and then we'll go to the rest of the panelists.
I think we had three very broad questions that we could have, separate panels for each of the questions. I just want to mention on the first comment on the report that you mentioned on Asian adaptation, which I think it's extremely good. So looking forward to getting the link. We're doing a lot of work in the IMF and through the coalition on also having macroeconomic tools to understand the effect of both slow-moving global warming, but also extreme weather events on macro frameworks, macro fiscal frameworks. And this all starts with having very good data. So we have a climate database to look at both average temperature, precipitation, and then be able to understand under different scenarios how the macro fiscal framework of each country is going to be affected. And then based on that, we also have a tool that is called QCraft, stands for Quantitative Climate Fiscal Risk Assessment Tool. And what we do with this is then understand these different scenarios on variables like debt to GDP ratios, for example, and also be able to evaluate what is the optimal response for adaptation, because that's where the investment and adaptation should come in. If you're able to show that certain investment, let's say on sea level rise, is able to save X million dollars as opposed to doing nothing in a community, then you should have a very clear case for investment adaptation for private finance. So that's one. On CBAM, which is, I guess, a totally different topic now, moving into mitigation. The only point that I will make is, CBAM is a subset of border carbon adjustment. This is just trying to protect the competitiveness of energy-intensive trade-exposed industries. Because if you have carbon pricing in your jurisdiction, like in the EU, and you're importing goods from other countries without a carbon price, then you're gonna maybe hurt the competitiveness of your energy-intensive trade-exposed industries. So what the CBAM is trying to do is making sure that there's a level playing field for those imports. And that will probably generate other countries to start some form of carbon pricing domestically, because if you are going to be taxed on the products that you export, you rather want to tax them domestically and get the revenue. And I mean, it's a lot of complications on CBAM, but yes, ideally, if a good is taxed domestically going to the EU, then it's not going to be double tax. So it's not going to be subject to CBAM if it's already being taxed domestically, the carbon content of the goods. But I mean, this is a very, very long topic. I'll defer to my colleagues from government to answer the question for our Mozambican colleague, which is directly related to communities and how governments can, so I don't want to speak on behalf of government officials, but I'll look to my colleagues for words of wisdom on that.
All right. Thank you very, very much. And Sam, back to you.
The Mozambique question is a little difficult. Let me go to CBAM first, a little bit. Yes, Diego clearly explained what CBAM is and those, carbon border adjustment mechanisms. But my sister from Egypt, yes, it's going to affect us. And remember, we're dealing with EU, and EU is dealing with individual countries, especially if you look at Africa. So what do you do? And studies have been looked at if individual countries will be affected more. But as a region, if we come together, we may, there are resources. If you talk about carbon pricing and carbon taxation, if you do it in Uganda and Kenya is not doing it, or Rwanda, then investors will move. So we need to start thinking as a region. That's very key. But if you look at the list now, I did it for my country, the list of imports and exports, it's not affecting me at the moment because the minerals, the CBAM is not. But EUDR is, because it's affecting agriculture, coffee, and the rest. And we're trying to make sure we register and comply by end of this year, which we should do. But I think it's good also we look at it as at regional level, both the Asian and then we can be able to, the impact is there, but we know it comes with a goodwill because we have to mitigate and adapt and reduce emissions. So it's getting ready. That's very, very critical. There's a lot of literature that has come up of recent. We can look at that. My brother, we have to have critical thinking. We have to reduce our expenditure. As Africans, I'll tell you, we do spend a lot on unnecessary things. I'll tell you, this could be off record, but how many of us that came from Africa came business class? And how many at the other? Those are simple things we should be able to discuss at our level and be able to make sure our expenditure is prudent. Our expenditure goes to those, all of us as a globe, goes to the things that we really need, and we must know how much income we have, other than looking for money somewhere else and we start spending it anyhow. I'd like to thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Regarding the first intervention, if I got it right, in the case of Costa Rica, we have been working from different approaches, for example, the Global Risk Assessment Framework and others regarding insurances, to try to evaluate how should we protect the public infrastructure and investments we think climate change as a very diverse hazard. Regarding the second intervention, we have carbon credit, so far not carbon taxing, but this is one of the topics under discussion, because in our case, it's very important to address the national program for the payment of ecosystem services, which being already, it has almost 30 years under implementation, and it's been very successful. But we will probably see its resources reducing as the consumption of electric vehicles increases. So do you remember you asked me about that? This is important. So carbon taxing is been suggesting as one of the options to fill the financial gap, because we need to keep this program, which is a very important program for us, not only from the landscape or biodiversity or climate change perspective, but also from a economic perspective. Because it has shown, it has demonstrated to be environmentally one of the most successful policies we have developed so far, but also as a climate action program. So carbon taxing is one of the considerations we are taking into account. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I really hope that this has been a little bit of food for thought. We had a lot of youth in the room, more than the sector and finance ministries, but hopefully the youth will put that pressure on their ministries of finance and environment and sector ministries to come together so that we build something for a better future. And for any other conversations, please feel free to approach our panel bilaterally. Thank you very, very much for your attendance, and a big clap to my panelists, please.